Good afternoon. It is great to be here with all of you, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Daniel Pasco Aguilar, and I'm Excelsior College's founding director of the Center for Social Justice and Chief Diversity Officer. Excelsior College is thrilled to observe Women's History Month this year with a fantastic keynote speaker, a member of our very own Board of Trustees, Gretchen Evans. Now, President Cable has kindly offered to formally introduce you, Gretchen. So as excited as I am about you having said yes and about your keynote, Gretchen, I promise not to get ahead of myself. This year's Women's History Month has a theme of providing healing and promoting hope. Such a relevant theme as we continue to grapple with the multiple systemic challenges we're facing as individuals, organizations, and as a society today. Providing healing and promoting hope is a powerful tribute to the incredible work of frontline and healthcare workers throughout the pandemic and beyond, as well as a moving recognition of the many ways in which women across the nation and the world have led healing and hope throughout history. Today's keynote will also be an important reminder of the critical impact of the healing and hope Excelsior women, the women who have joined us today, and the women in our communities and families lead every day in our students and our organization's growth and development. I would like to take a second to thank Excelsior College for its keen focus on DEI and social justice, and in particular, the President's Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, the marketing team, of course, you, Gretchen, David, Lori, Tina, Nyla, Katie, Tammy, Nan, and Elizabeth. This event would not be taking place without your leadership and support. Now, before we get started, we have a couple of housekeeping items. We will follow Gretchen's keynote this afternoon with a comments, questions, and answers session. We encourage you to think of questions or comments you might have for Gretchen as you listen to her keynote and reflect on Women's History Month. Please share your questions or comments in the Q&A space, not in the chat of our webinar Zoom, so that we can read them to Gretchen right after her keynote. And now, I have the privilege of introducing David Scable, president of Excelsior College since August of 2020. President Scable is a leader in adult and non-traditional education, student access to post-secondary education, and has led in this capacity at Marquette University, the University of Wisconsin, and now Excelsior College. For his work, he has received the Julius Nolte Award of Extraordinary Leadership, the highest professional recognition by the University Professional and Continuing Education Association. So a leader in higher education, a crafty woodworker, an avid fisherman, and a mean cook, I am delighted to pass the word to President Scable to introduce Gretchen Evans. Thank you,
Thank
David.
you, Daniel. And many thanks to all of you for putting this great program together. We're really glad that we're able to host this. And Gretchen, of course, thank you for keynoting. So I have had the pleasure to know Gretchen only for about a year. She started as a member of our board of trustees right after I joined the college. And as you can imagine, all of our trustees are very exceptional people, leaders in their fields, come from fields across the spectrum. But Gretchen really stands out. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her in a minute, but she is truly a remarkable person. And I'm delighted that she's willing to talk to all of us today because her story is deeply inspirational and transformative and really in many ways representative in the best possible sense of what can be, even in times of tremendous challenge. So let me tell you a little bit about Gretchen. I'm going to be a little bit long-winded, so sorry, Gretchen, but it's a story that's worth telling. So Gretchen grew up in Abilene, Texas. She's one of 3 siblings. And while she wasn't raised in a military family, her father was a World War II vet. And after high school, Gretchen went to college at Texas Tech, but soon found tuition costs to be a big hurdle. So at the age of 19, Gretchen joined the Army. And after basic training, she became a counterintelligence agent and learned to speak fluently in German and Italian. And after 6 months, she said, I realized I had found my calling. I loved the camaraderie, the structure, the sense of mission and purpose, and that I was contributing to something greater than myself. And at 5 feet 2 inches tall, her small stature helped her go unnoticed as a spy in counterterrorism operations throughout Italy, Central America, and the Middle East. She also undertook leadership roles in multiple combat engagements and was deployed in many capacities, including serving as a paratrooper. A few years later, Gretchen joined a Black Ops unit and attended basic airborne and advanced airborne training at Fort Benning, Georgia, and later oversaw all training for the counterintelligence agents and interrogators of the 519th Military Intelligence Battalion at Fort Hood, Texas. Throughout her nearly 3 decades in service, Gretchen worked her way up to Command Sergeant Major, the highest rank an enlisted soldier can achieve, a promotion she received in 2001. By 2006, Gretchen was responsible for the security and personnel on all bases and forwarding operations bases in Afghanistan, and she oversaw more than 30,000 ground troops. And in 2006, Gretchen was near the end of her deployment in Afghanistan. And she said, I was flying in a helicopter, checking on troops, and we landed and I exited the helicopter and it lifted off to land in a safer place until I was ready to leave. I'd been on the ground less than 10 minutes when mortars started coming in like rain. We immediately sent out a quick reaction force to neutralize the enemy that was firing at us. But in the meantime, I was standing in the open, yelling to my troops to get inside the fortified bunkers for protection. Before I could get into a bunker myself, a round landed to my right and detonated, killing 2 soldiers standing next to me. The force of the blast threw me toward one of the concrete bunkers, which I hit head first. I was medevaced to Bagram Air Force Base and then to Landstuhl, where I was put into a coma for a couple of days while the doctors assessed my injuries. When I woke, they told me I was deaf, had a traumatic brain injury, and other internal and external injuries. I knew right then that my career in the military was over, and I had no plan B. Gretchen's recovery was slow and difficult, and I know she'll talk about that today. But as you'll see in a minute, Gretchen is now stronger than ever. She continues to pursue her passion for extreme sports with fellow injured veterans. And in 2019, Gretchen and her unbroken team signed up to complete the Team World's Toughest Race, a 671 kilometer, 7-day endurance race held in Fiji. Gretchen frequently speaks to veteran groups, and she's now part of Women's Veteran Speakers, a national speakers bureau. She's given presentations to Prudential, the Baltimore Orioles, Kimberly-Clark, Food Lion, and 2 organizations that are dear to her heart, No Barriers USA and America's Vet Dogs, and hopefully a third now dear to her heart, Excelsior College. In 2018, Gretchen's book, Leading from the Front, was published and is now available in paperback from Amazon. So it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Gretchen Evans.
Thank you, David. You got told my whole story. Okay, so I guess I can go now. So it is my honor and privilege to be with everyone today to celebrate and to honor women for this month. So I'm going to take you on a story of my life, and throughout it, I'll demonstrate where grit and determination and resiliency is a key part in all of our lives. I would suspect to say that there's not one person out there that hasn't experienced something traumatic in their life, hasn't confronted some sort of barrier, hasn't had some tragedy. And so this is about getting through the get through, learning how to engage your grit, becoming resilient. And the underlying thought is to always have hope. So I did join the Army in 1979, and there's a little bit of a funny story about that. And that is, as David alluded to, I was trying to put myself through college because both my parents had died when I was 15, within 6 months of each other. And so my oldest brother, who had just turned 21, took guardianship of myself and my younger sibling. But the rule was that when you turned 18, you're on your own. So I was trying to work full time, and I was selling plasma on the side until they deemed that I'd been way enough to sell plasma. And I thought to myself, there's got to be an easier way to get an education because I'm just not making it. So I went down to the recruiting station in Austin, Texas, and they were all in the same building. So I didn't really care which branch I went in. So I just went in the first door that was open, and it was the Marine Corps. Now, I didn't get 2 steps inside that office when a really big, strong Marine looked at me and he says, "No, I don't think so. You're too small to be a Marine." So he sent me next door, which was the Air Force. And I thought to myself, okay, I'll fly airplanes. That'll be great. And we were all sitting down talking about it. And all of a sudden the recruiter says, "Sorry, you have to be 5'4" to fly aircraft so you can reach the pedals." So I was getting a little discouraged. I was 0 for 2, went next door to the Navy. And I was just about to sign the contract. Okay, I'm going to sail the 7 seas. I'm going to see the world. This is going to be so cool. And I looked up at the poster that was on the wall behind the recruiter, and it had the Navy uniform with the bell bottoms. And I just happened to ask, I said, "Are you still wearing those uniforms?" And he goes, "Yes." I go, "I can't do bell bottoms again. Okay, I was raised in the 70s. I'm not wearing bell bottoms. I'm sorry." So I got up and I left, and I went next door to the Army. I just barely stepped inside the doorway, and I looked at the Army recruiter and said, "You got a problem with my size?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "We don't care how big you are. We just care how big your bite is." So that began my career in the military with the US Army. And it was love at first sight, honestly. I loved the fact that it was a organization that was serving something other than ourselves. If you ever heard a veteran from World War II or the Korean War or even in Vietnam, sometimes they ask, "What did you do?" They would say, "I was in the service." And that term comes from serving something other than yourself. I'm in the service means I was in the service for my country. I was in the service of even other countries for humanitarian sakes. You were doing something to provide care for something else other than you. And that meant something to me. And also, I love the fact that there was structure during the day and that we knew what the mission was, and that I had this camaraderie of people who were all working towards the same goal. So I spent a total of 27 years, and I won't go into all the 27 moves I made and all the things that I did, but there's a couple events in my military career that really shaped me and prepared me. I didn't know at the time for what my future was going to hold. And part of that was the multiple deployments I went on. So my first combat deployment was jumping into Grenada in 1983. And I was young, I was 22, I guess. And my first combat experience, and we were in the airplane getting ready to go out. But let me back up a little bit. So the night before, they sequestered us in a hangar, and they gave us a copy of the Geneva Convention and told us to read it in case we got captured. So I got it, and I read most of it. Okay, I didn't read all of it, but I read most of it. But what I did read was it says that it was against the Geneva Convention to shoot at people under canopy. And I thought, well, that's good news for me because I'm about to jump out of an airplane into an airport in Grenada. So that means at least the ride down would be good, right? So when we got over Grenada and we jumped out, first of all, as you know, history will tell you that airport was not secure. Okay. Secondly, people started shooting at me, and I was yelling underneath my canopy, "Didn't you read the Geneva Convention?" Okay, so when I landed and I got into a safe place, and you know the story about Grenada. It didn't take long, and we did what we needed to do there. But what I found out later was that part of I didn't read the whole Geneva Convention, and what it says is that only counts for pilots, when they eject, you cannot shoot at a pilot who's under canopy because they're not considered to be warrior fighters. Okay. So now I read everything. Okay. Like, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to read the whole thing, whatever's put in front of me. So anyway, so like David said, I went from Grenada to Central America in the 80s, and then Bosnia and Kosovo and Somalia. And I'll have to tell you that Somalia was a peacekeeping operation, as you know, and it was humanitarian, but we all know what happened there. And I will say that was some of the most awful fighting I'd ever experienced in my life. And then 9/11 happened. I was promoted to Command Sergeant Major in April of 2001, and then we were at war in September 2001. And so my job as a Command Sergeant Major is to be the advocate for the soldier, to take care of the soldier in every possible way, whether that means training or equipment, morale, welfare. I'm also to advise the commander of whatever unit that I'm assigned to. And that's the role of Command Sergeant Major. And it's a very sacred role. And there were not many women who had risen to this rank at this time. And there certainly were not many women who were downrange at this rank serving in this capacity. And so it was unusual, and it was a very lonely place because I didn't have any peers. There was not another one of me around. And so it was tough. It was tough. I felt a lot of pressure to do the right things. The decisions I made were very important. They were life-changing at times and affected lots of things that were on the ground. So my last tour of duty in Afghanistan started in December 2004, where I was the Command Sergeant Major of all of Afghanistan bases and forward operating bases. And on this particular day, we had got orders to put together a task force. And we were 90 days from rotating back home. And so what happens in war when you rotate a big unit, we're talking like a division-sized unit with thousands of soldiers, you don't just all get up one day and get on an airplane, fly home. It's done over a period of time. So as I'm rotating my unit back to the States, the unit that's replacing us is bringing in their units, okay? So we call it right seating, so that they can get a lay of the land and understand the rules of engagement, and we can brief them on what's going on so they have a good picture of what they're going to be faced with for the next year or so. We got this order saying, put together this task force, and we needed to go up into a mountain to get rid of some bad guys that had been coming down out of the mountains at night and terrorizing some friendly Afghan villages. So they decided to take the task force and make it half of my soldiers and half of the soldiers from the new unit coming in to replace us. Now, normally someone of my rank would not go on such an operation, but I felt compelled to go on this particular one because it was not all my soldiers. And I knew that this would probably be the last task force that we would do before we pulled out. And I just felt like I needed to be there. So the plan was well played out. And then intel told us that we outmanned them and we outgunned them. And so we were not overly concerned. As much as you can prepare for an operation such as this, we felt like we had done our due diligence and that this was going to be a successful operation. We were supposed to come in Chinook helicopters at the base of the mountains right at dawn. And then everybody had an assignment to go into a rally point. And so we would fan out and go in this mountain so all the flanks were covered. And we would make our way up the mountain, we would engage the enemy, and then we would come back. So right as we were coming in, and the Chinooks never land because they're big beasts. And once they land, it's very hard for them to take off again, and it makes them very vulnerable. So usually about 4 feet from the ground, we start jumping out of the helicopters and making way to our rally points. On this particular morning, we came in right as the dawn, the sun was just now coming up, and the helicopters were coming in. There was 4 of them, and soldiers were jumping out of the helicopters. And all of a sudden, we started taking machine gun fire. We were getting hit with mortars. All kinds of things were happening. It was totally a surprise. We had been ambushed. And so instead of having this well orchestrated, rally point, fanning out, everybody knowing where they're going to go, everybody was basically running for their lives to find some place where they could get behind something to protect themselves from the incoming machine gun fire and from indirect fire. And Afghanistan, the terrain there are not like big trees or stuff. It's very barren. It's like desert. And so we were hiding behind rocks. Sometimes they weren't much bigger than we were, just to protect ourselves. And what happened was myself and 14 other soldiers got totally separated from the main body of the task force. So there was a task force that had fanned out properly, and then there was the enemy, and it was myself and 14 soldiers. We had no place to go but up the mountain, but because behind us was a flat valley, and we knew if we ran through the valley, we would be killed instantly because we had no cover. So we started making our way up the mountain. Within the first 2 or 3 minutes, I lost 3 of my soldiers who were shot and killed. We were hovering behind a set of rocks, and I knew that I had to come up with a quick plan in order to save our lives. So I decided that we were going to leapfrog up to the top of the mountain. And what that means is that half of us would lay down in a prone position and do suppressive fire, which means putting your weapon on automatic and sending as many rounds towards the enemy as you can, while the other half would move while you were doing that, and they could move somewhat safely until they found a place where they could lay down and provide suppressive fire. And this caused this leapfrogging, and this is the way we were making our way up to the mountain. About halfway up the mountain, I realized very quickly I had 2 very serious problems. One, we were running out of real estate because I could see the top of the mountain. And 2, I was running out of ammunition because suppressive fire uses up a lot of ammunition. Yet we were in a dire situation. I was on the radio constantly asking for close air support, for reinforcements or whatever. But because we were so isolated and the friendly forces of the rest of the task force were intermingled with the enemy forces, it would not have been safe to send in like Apache helicopters or any kind of high weaponry because there was too high of a risk for friendly, casualties. So they basically said to me, "Sergeant Major, you're on your own," and that's just the reality of the situation. So the 13 of us, 11 of us that were left, we sat there and said, what are we going to do? We can make this last stand right here where we are, but we're not going to survive. We're going to be overrun by the enemy, or we can go up to the top of the mountain and have maybe at least a better leverage from better terrain. So we decided to go to the top of the mountain, and we made our way up there, and we laid down in a prone position, and we took every magazine that we had and we stacked our magazines. And this was going to be our last stand. We knew that when we ran out of ammunition, that was it. And we thought to ourselves, okay, here we go. And before I could see it, I heard it, that beautiful sound of helicopter blades. And out from behind us, a mountain, came this Chinook helicopter, and with it were 2 Apache helicopters. And the Apaches flew over us so close that they were blowing up dust, and they started firing their Hellfire missiles into the enemy that had been pursuing us all morning up to the top of that mountain. The Chinook was able to fly on the backside of the mountain and hover close enough to the mountain where we could run down the backside and load those who had been wounded and ourselves into the back of that helicopter. And I'll never forget, as we're pulling away from the mountain and it's getting smaller, and I'm standing at the tailgate as it's starting to come up, and I'm watching that mountain, and I thought to myself, I have just spent a lifetime on that mountain. I felt like I had been there forever. And to be quite honest with you, there's still a part of me that's on that mountain because I lost troops that day. We fly back to headquarters. We hop out of the Chinook helicopter. We take our wounded. We put them into a medevac helicopter. We get them to where they need to get care. And I went around to shake the hand of that Chinook pilot because in my heart, I thought to myself, I think he might have disobeyed orders to come get us. But I just wanted to say thank you for saving our lives, because he did. And he said to me, Sergeant Major, we were listening to you on the radio all morning, and we were rooting for you. And there was no way we were going to leave you on that mountain. And you did good. And I walked away, and a young soldier came up to me, clean uniform, and he hands me an MRE, and he says, it's lunchtime, Sergeant Major. And I thought, lunchtime? I feel like I've been gone for years. So I asked him to sit down and eat with me. And we opened up the MREs, and I made small talk with him and asked him what he did in the military and what, where he was from and how was his family, and had this just really casual conversation. And then when it got time to stand up, I reached out to shake his hand, and I looked down at my uniform, and I was covered in blood and debris and all kinds of stuff. And that young man had sat there and had lunch, if you could call it that, with me, and never said a word about the way that I looked. That instance of coming off that mountain and having to make decisions that had life consequences for lots of people probably changed me more than anything else at that point in my life. Just 3 weeks later, like David said, I was flying around trying to convince my soldiers, or remind my soldiers that we were almost home. We were weeks from going home. So close you could almost smell the apple pie. I was seeing short timer calendars come up with lines going through the dates. They were counting down the dates, and it's perfectly normal and natural for them to do that. But it's the most dangerous time in a deployment, those last couple of weeks, because they're thinking about going home. And some of they get distracted. And I wanted them to say, you got to keep your head on a swivel, because we're still in a very dangerous place. And I want to get you all back as safely as I can. I had been on the ground 10 minutes, and mortar rounds were coming in like rain. And like David said, I was rushing the soldiers into the bunkers. And when that round hit, and when a mortar round comes in and it hits the earth, and it's a sound you'll never forget when it detonates, and it sucks all the oxygen out of the air. And then when it explodes, it throws all that earth and all the metal and all the explosives that are inside that round. And this round happened to be a homemade round by the enemy, and it had nails, and it had razor blades, and it had all kinds of things in it, and it threw it. I was thrown into the bunker head first, and then medevac to Bagram, and then to Lonsdale, put into a coma. And on the day that they woke me up, there was a young Army doctor standing next to me, and he had a 8 by 11.5 dry erase board, and he was writing something on it. He got my attention by waving to me, and he flipped it over, and he'd written the words, "Your death," on this dry erase board. I took the board from him and I erased it with my hand. I took the magic marker and I wrote the word "forever" and showed it to him, and he nodded his head. I didn't know a lot right then, but I knew one thing for sure, that my military career was over, that I was no longer going to be able to be in service to my country. I was never going to lead troops again. I was never going to wear the uniform again. You cannot be deaf and be on active duty. And I didn't have a plan B. I'd never given retirement one thought, even though I had 27 years in. I never thought I would be injured. And I'd lay there and I thought I didn't even have a hard address. I had been deployed so many times, so frequently, that my car had been in storage since 2001. And all I had was a barracks room at Fort Bragg, where I stored a few personal items. I had grown up in the military. I went in at 19. I was wounded at 46. It was the only life that I knew, and I was devastated. I was sent back to the States for rehabilitation, and I got excellent care through the military and through the VA. And there came a day when a doctor walked into me and he said, "Gretchen, this is as good as it's going to get for you." And those were so hopeless words to me, because as good as it was going to get for me still looked pretty bad to me. I was still deaf. I had a traumatic brain injury. I had other injuries that I was still dealing with. I didn't have a career. Nobody would hire me. I went in for my first job interview, and it was a crappy job to begin with, but I was, beggars can't be choosy. And I sat in front of a guy, and it was like a really low paying, like administrative job. And he's looking at my resume. Here I had been the command sergeant major of Afghanistan and led 30,000 troops. I had all this leadership and management. I did billions of dollars of logistics. I did have all this stuff. And I thought it was a pretty good resume. And after he read it, he looked up at me and he said, "Can you type?" I thought to myself, really? I said, "Yes, I can type." And he goes, "Well, what else can you do?" And then, you know what? I got snarky. And I said, "I'm deadly accurate with a hand grenade." And I have to tell you, I didn't get that job. And that's where the interview ended. And I walked out of that office and I said to myself, I don't have a place here anymore. And this country that I fought for, nobody's ever going to hire a deaf 46-year-old woman with a traumatic brain injury and with PTSD. Nobody's ever going to give me a job, because what they see is something that is broken. What they see are my disabilities, not my abilities. What they see is something that they're going to have to work with and make accommodations for. And for the first time in my life, I really did feel broken. So I had two choices at this point in my life. I could succumb to this sense of hopelessness. I could have become one of the 22 that we hear about every day, or I could find a new path. And my transition was not easy. And there were days that I didn't want to be here anymore. But with support from my family and my friends, and honestly, my own grit, I thought to myself, I'm going to have to put my foot in this proverbial shutting door on my life, or I'm not going to have a life. And so I did. And so that's where I would like to talk just a little bit about what grit really is. Everybody has it. If you're sitting here thinking, no, only these exceptional people have grit, that heroes are made out of people who do extraordinary things, that's not true. We all are given the same amount of grit. Everybody has it, okay? Until you have to engage it or want to engage your grit rather than give up. That's where the power comes in. Because once you engage your grit and you say to yourself, no, I'm not going to give up, then you know what that feels like. And then you can apply to all kinds of things in life, whether it be your family life, whether it be your business, whether it be the pursuits of your goals and your hopes and your dreams. Once you engage that grit, then I truly believe this, and this, I got this from No Barriers, but this is my personal mantra, and I believe this, and I would hope that each of you can embrace some part of this, is that what is within you is stronger than anything that's in your way. And if you can believe that, and it means more than just a saying that you say to yourself when you're faced with bad times, but if you can believe that I have already within me, it's there to face anything that might present itself to me, then life's not quite so scary. You have it there with you. You just have to engage. You have to believe in yourself. We are so prone to telling ourselves no before anybody else does. No, I don't have the talent. No, can't do this. No, this. We tell ourselves no before anybody else does. And I'm asking you to tell yourself yes. If that's what you want to do, yes. Incorporate help. And then we're going to talk about rope team, how important rope teams are in life. So in the military, we really do have rope teams. When we are climbing really steep terrain or really dangerous terrain, we literally tie ourselves together. And the reason for that is if one of you slips, you don't fall to your death. You only fall a little ways. And then the rest of us, we pick in until you can stand up and continue with the mission. And the same thing in civilian life. Everyone's a rope team because we're all going to stumble and we're going to fall. You don't have to fall far. If you've got people that you can count on that are going to pick in for you until you can stand up again. And the beauty of a rope is sometimes you're the one that falls, and sometimes you're the one that has to pick in for somebody else, right? There's this community, there's this connection that says, I got you. Okay, we are going to get to the mountaintop, and whatever that is in your life, okay, whether it's personal, professional, or it's a hobby, or what you are going to, and you've got a rope you're to. When you stumble and fall, you're going to be able to get back up because you've got people who are standing there with you. And when they stumble and fall, they're going to pick in for, you're going to pick in for them. And there's power in that. And I encourage all of you, if you don't have a rope team, find one and be part of one. It will change your life. We're not meant to go through all of this as individuals. We're meant to go through the walks of life, whatever you are or whatever you're doing, with people surrounded with us. And every success I've ever had has come through other people who are willing to be part of my life, part of my rope team, part of my success. It was never done by myself. My success of getting to the rank of Command Sergeant Major was because my soldiers were willing to follow me and support me and believe in me. Even when things were hard, they took a chance. And was I always right? No. But they still were there. And that's the same thing with whoever you are, whoever you're working with, whatever you're doing. Okay, we're all human beings. We're all doing the best that we can. We're all determined to give something back in life to make a difference. And that's the other thing, is this hope. So I was hopeless for a little while. I thought there's no way to live this life the way that I am with all these injuries. I had wished that I had died on the battlefield. That would have been so much easier than navigating life as a deaf person and a person with a traumatic injury and with PTSD, because this was hard. Engaging life with these disabilities was hard. I had so many doors slammed in my face, again, because people saw something that was broken. They wouldn't even give me the chance. I remember when Team Unbroken, we first put our application in to compete in the world's toughest race, and they told me no like 5 times. They said, this is the world's toughest race. This makes an Ironman look like a church picnic. You don't understand how hard this really is, and you people are not capable of doing it, because everybody in my team had some sort of disability or illness. And they kept saying no, and I kept saying, don't determine what I can accomplish or who I am based on my disabilities. I'm so much more than my disabilities. I have mixed abilities now. Okay, so once I'm deaf, but you know what? I learned how to lip read. That's a new ability. So I've overcome that disability. I've added an ability I didn't have before, because I don't consider myself disabled. I consider myself mixed ability. So for every disability I have, I found a workaround that's given me another ability that I didn't have before. Finally, Bear Grylls and Mark Burnett got on a Zoom call with me, and they said to me, Gretchen, we want to say yes to Team Unbroken, but we're afraid. And I said, well, what are you afraid of? And he says, we're afraid you guys might get hurt. And I laughed. I literally laughed out loud and said, we have been blown to smithereens. Okay, we've already been hurt. All I'm asking for you to do is to put us on the same playing field with everybody else. And if we wash out on day one, then that's on us. But you're determining by saying no what I'm capable of. And that's not fair, and it's not right. Open the door that has been closed. Let us live a normal life. We have lived with these disabilities and navigated life with them. And we can do this to the best of our ability. Are we going to win the race? No. Are we going to compete as best we can? You bet we are. And finally, they said, well, gosh, when you sound it like that, you make us sound like assholes. And I said, well, don't be one. Okay. Say yes. And then there's a power of that word, yes. Think how many times when you don't have all the pieces to the puzzle, you don't have all the answers, and you're out on that ledge, okay, and then you have the decision, you can say no or you can say yes. Everybody wants to have all the answers before they say yes. I say, if you think you can do it and believe in yourself, say yes. And then, we'll work out the details on the back end. I'm not saying be careless or not do due diligence, but I'm saying it's so easy to say no, because once you say no, there's no work to do. You're done. But if you say yes, then we can try to figure out. And I'll tell you how powerful yes is. So after part of my rehabilitation, I was out running my day. I'm an avid runner. And if I don't run, I'm not a nice person. So I was out running. I was in Atlanta and I was on a sidewalk and there was traffic. Of course, there was traffic in Atlanta. There was lots of traffic to my right. And a guy on a bicycle was coming up behind me. Now, most of my injuries are invisible. My deafness is invisible. My traumatic brain injury is invisible. My PTSD is invisible. So they're not things that you would normally, I look like a normal, healthy person. The guy on the bike yells out to me, passing you on your left. I never heard that, but I felt him coming. How you can just feel somebody was coming. I wasn't going to step into traffic. So I stepped to my left and he hit me and threw me into traffic. And a guy in a black Mercedes, slammed on his brakes. And I remember smelling the burning rubber. And I remember looking up and being able to read the license plate. And he got out and he said, I almost killed you. And he did. And so I had broken my clavicle. So they put me in an ambulance and they sent me to the VA hospital. And a doctor walked in and he says, Gretchen, you got to quit doing things that you used to do. You're deaf now and you have a traumatic brain injury. Here's another, a door closing on me. And my audiologist walked up to me and he says, do they make service dogs for deaf people? And nobody knew the answer to that. So I went home that day, I got on the computer and I started researching service dogs for deaf people. And every organization that I looked at was very clear in what they did. They did it for certain things, but not one organization listed one for deaf people until I got to America's Vet Dogs. And they didn't say they did it for deaf people, but what their mission statement said was, we provide service dogs for anybody who has any disability. And so I said, okay, here's my place. So I wrote an email and I wrote everything that was wrong with me. And in the last sentence I wrote said, can you help me? And I'm going to tell you honestly, I took a deep breath before I sent that email because I thought to myself, I don't know how many more slam doors I can tolerate in my life. I'm tired of being told no. I'm tired of saying you can't do this. I'm tired of not being enough. I'm tired of people looking at me and saying you're broken. And I took a second before I hit that send and just said a little quiet prayer to myself and said, please let this be a yes. So I sent the email and then I got on Facebook and I waited around, and then how an email pops up on your screen when you get you get that thing. And I sit there and I said a prayer and I said, please let this be positive. Like I said, I just don't know how many times I can be kicked to the curb. And I opened up that email and there was one word on that email. All it said was yes. What I didn't know was that America's Vet Dog had never trained a hearing dog before. But when they read my email, they said, we train dogs to do all kinds of things. Why can't we train a dog for a deaf person? So instead of saying no, or instead of saying maybe, or instead of saying any number of things, they said, we're going to say yes, and we're going to work it out on the back end. But we're going to give this veteran hope. We're going to say yes. And then they did. And so the first hearing dog at America's Vet Dogs ever trained for me was named Aura. And she was a life changer for me. She notified me of sounds. I was able to drive again because I can't hear emergency vehicles. So I was not able to get a driver's license. And so with Aura in the car with me, now I can drive and I can go places by myself because she alerts me to things. And my husband can travel without worrying about that I'm going to, not going to be able to hear the fire alarm or not be able to hear an intruder. She was a life changer in my life. All of these things along my path from being the day, that millisecond when my world changed, when I was injured, to where I am now, has been through grit, determination, resiliency, hope, and most importantly, my rope team. So I'd like to leave you today with this and thinking, if you can take home anything that I say today with you today, is that don't give up on yourself. You have already within you anything that you need to do to approach anything. Find other people who believe in you. Be careful who you put on your rope team, but get a rope team and be a good rope team member. So I'm hoping that what I said today has meaning to you and made you think about your own life and your own situations. And now I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have. You're probably wondering, why are you at Excelsior now? You'll have to ask David that, because I don't know. Okay, I don't think I'm at the table of all these really brilliant people, and but maybe it was my grit and determination, and maybe David thought maybe we could use a little bit of that at Excelsior. Okay, because it's a hard world out there right now, and we all need each other. So I will let, if you will, please, and I tell you this is my disclaimer. Don't be afraid to ask me something. If there's always been a question that you've wanted to ask someone, especially a veteran, maybe you have a family member or something that you've been afraid to ask because you don't want it to be intrusive or awkward, ask me, because I want you to feel free to get those answers that you need if it will be helpful to you. I thank you for your time today. I know everybody's got a busy life. We're all doing all kinds of things. Thank you for sharing this time for me and for Women's History Month, and all the wonderful women out there who opened doors for me and kicked out ceilings. And then hopefully I paid it for by opening up some doors and kicking out some ceilings for myself. And for those of you who are coming up, you young, wonderful women, kicking some doors and kicking some ceilings, because we need you out there. Thank you so very much for having me today.
Gretchen, this is incredible, and we're so grateful for your willingness to share your story, your message, engage your grit. You're so much more than your ability challenges. Say yes, find and depend on your rope team, and you have everything you need to succeed. Such powerful messages of courage and resilience and healing and hope. And we're so honored that you were willing to share your story and your wisdom and your leadership with us. So thank you. Now, as you know, we have planned to continue your amazing keynote with questions and comments from our audience today. So everyone, if you haven't done so yet, please share your questions or comments in the Q&A space, not in the chat, in the Q&A space of our webinar Zoom, so that we can read them to Gretchen for her answers and feedback. And thank you, Gretchen, for stretching a little more to do that with us. So for this purpose, I would like to quickly introduce to you Tammy Parsons, Director of Academic Advisement, and Susana Rodriguez, Director of the Center for Writing Excellence, both longstanding co-leaders of Excelsior's President's Committee on DEI. So thank you so much for doing this. They will be guiding us through a questions and answer session on Gretchen's keynote. So Tammy and Nan, take it away.
Thank you, Daniel. Wow, Gretchen, I think I speak for everyone when I just send you a heartfelt thank you for sharing that truly enthralling story. I was quite literally sitting on the edge of my seat as I listened, and I feel like I was with you on that mountain. It was the way you described it and the detail that you shared. It was like, I really felt like I was there with you. I probably will not ever have even a fraction of an understanding of how terrifying that must have been, but I'm going to have to try to snap myself out of I'm in awe of you and your story, and I'm grateful that you're here with us today to celebrate Women's History Month. There is one question in the Q&A so far. Oh, it's moved up to 3. I'll read the first one, which is from Alice Alicea. And she says, Gretchen, I don't know if you remember her. She says, having met you has been one of the most rewarding experiences in my life. With that said, what would be your biggest advice to anyone facing adversity and having to find the resiliency needed to overcome it? I know you did speak to this a little bit, but maybe perhaps if you had anything specific to add to it to answer Alice's question.
So I truly believe the first thing you have to do is believe in yourself. Okay, that when the world looks dim and you feel alone, then sometimes it really is that's where it has to start. So that's why I tell everybody, you have that grit in you. It's there. And that the mantra of what's within you is stronger than anything in your way. That don't just say it, live it, believe it. And then, like I said, the rope team is paramount in success. And not only is it paramount in success, but I don't know about you guys, but like I hiked a mountain this morning, and had I done it by myself, it would have been fine. It was great. We saw a beautiful sunrise. But the fact that I hiked it with other people, there's something beautiful about sharing your victories and your failures with other people. It makes life so much sweeter. And and I mean, to me, it's like if you're headed to the top, drag as many people as you can with you, because there's plenty of room up there for everybody. So I hope that answers your question. Yes, of course I remember you, and thank you for joining us today.
For that, Gretchen, I'm going to turn it over to Tammy for the next question.
Thanks, Nan and Gretchen. I have to say that this has been wonderful and empowering and inspiring, and I was heart-throbbing for me as you were telling the story, that I was like, oh my gosh, what happened next? So you definitely, capture the audience. And one of the things I will just say that really caught my attention is when you said mixed ability, not a disability. And that felt very strong for me, because I feel, working with students, oftentimes we hear of certain things and we make certain assumptions, right? And based on what we hear, but, just because they may have a particular thing, it doesn't mean it's going to impact their ability to be a successful student. And so it's something that reminds me to continuously keep that in the back of my mind, when we're working with anyone, that, just because they may have a particular label, it's no indication of what they can do, because you certainly have shown that you have faced it all and continue to be successful. So thank you for sharing your story. And I will go on to the second question from Pamela. And she says, what were your personal thoughts on that mountain, thinking that there was no way out?
I had a couple of thoughts, and to be really, to be totally transparent with you, I thought we were going to die on that mountain. I, didn't know that the rescue operation was in place. They probably did that for a couple of reasons. One, for security reasons, because you never know if your comms have been compromised, and probably, like I said, I'm not 100% sure that it might have been a rogue mission for all I know. But I was at peace with that. I felt like as a leader, I did the best that I could to get those of us to the top of the mountain. That was my job, was to save as many lives as I could. But I also had some heartache with that as well, because not everybody made it to the top of the mountain, and you have to own that. Okay, as a leader, the burden of leadership is responsibility. And so I had to own that I left 3 men on that mountain, and that was really hard. And what I didn't share was that I was awarded the Bronze Star for that mission, and it felt awful for me to be recognized for what I felt like was a tragedy. In the Army's view, I did exactly what they would expect a leader to do. I used everything in my wheelhouse to get as many people to a safe place as I could, but it came at a cost of the ultimate sacrifice. And to receive an award for that felt really wrong for me. And honestly, for a long time, I didn't wear my Bronze Star, because it reminded me of the mountain and what was lost that day. So all those feelings, and also the third thought, and to be honest with you, as a female, I did not want to be captured. I knew that would not be a good story for me and for the military or for America. I didn't want to see myself or have my family or my soldiers or even America see myself, perhaps be beheaded on CNN or something. So I thought to myself, I can't get captured. So in the midst of all that stuff, these thoughts were going through my head. It was a pretty perilous, tough time for me. But that was a great question. I hope that answered it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen. And I'll turn it over to Nan to narrate the next question.
Thanks, Tammy. The next question in order is from our colleague, Tammy. She's head of the Career Services Center. I think she probably was working with a student at the very beginning of this meeting because she didn't hear that her question is, have you ever considered writing a book? And I'm sure she wasn't here for the first couple of minutes of the introduction. So maybe instead of asking you about, have you considered one, maybe you spend a couple of minutes telling us about what inspired you to write that book and tell us a little bit about what we might find if we were to purchase it and read it, because I sure want to at this point.
Okay, yeah. So it was never intended to be a book. That book, I self-published. There's no editor, so all you English majors, give me some grace. I wrote it. It came out of 2 years of intensive therapy. So the psychologist that I had, that I was sitting down, as we started to peel back the layers of the PTSD, and so because I served so long, 27 years, and I had so many combat experiences and so much death, that he asked me to write down things as part of the therapy so that he could help me unpack them. Okay. And he would ask me interrogative questions like, what did it sound like? And what did it smell like? And I was trying to work through some self-forgiveness, some leadership forgiveness, because I made decisions that cost people their lives. And so he was trying to prove a point to me to say, why did you make that decision? Because I was holding myself responsible for everything that went wrong. And I said, well, I made that decision because Intel told me that Route A was safer than Route B. I made that decision because my leadership skills and my training told me this was a better thing to do than this. So when I wrote that down, you use a different part of your brain when you write than when you think. I was able to see that I really did do the best that I could do under the circumstances, and I could forgive myself a little bit. And so leading from the front really came out of 2 years of intensive unpacking of war and being with soldiers and how amazing they are. It's really not about me, it's about my soldiers, and how amazing they are and how leadership works and things like that. And why it's important to lead from the front. I don't know where else you would lead from. You can't lead from the rear. But so that title made sense to me. If you're going to lead, you got to be out there, which goes back to the whole reason I was on the mountain in the first place, because I felt compelled to be there that day. So that, and you can buy the book on Amazon. It's $20. Okay, so, and it's a fast read. I will give you my disclaimer for the book is I wouldn't read it in public. It can be very emotional. I said this to a guy the other day and he laughed me off, and he was flying and they like called a doctor to check on him because he was weeping so badly. They thought there was something wrong with him. And there's some bad words in there, and I apologize for that. But you know, it's true to form. I wrote it, like I said, unfiltered. And so for the very reason that people could really read what, you know, I wanted it to be real. I wanted it to be authentic. So I hope that answered the question, right?
Oh, it did beautifully. Thank you. Tammy actually has a sort of a second half to her question, and it's a really good one. So if it's okay, I'd like to ask the second part of her question too. She says, I'd love to hear your favorite quote or piece of advice for those who encounter obstacles with bias or judgment based on their stature or outward appearances. So you have spoken to this a little bit, but she's wondering if you have any specific words of wisdom for folks who have experienced appearance bias.
Ask that a question again, please.
So Tammy's wondering if you have ways to help people who are dealing with bias that's based on the way they look or their small, and maybe in this case, their small stature.
Doesn't matter how big you are, it only matters how big your bite is. So, okay, so example, I get what she's saying. So, you know, I'm very petite. And so I'm not going to be able to lead in the military with the majority of people in the military, especially the time I served, and from 1979 to 2006, were male. Women were like less than 2 or 3% at that time. And I'm very petite, and most of the men were really big. So my leadership style had to complement my physical attributes. So I'm not going to bully some 6'3", 200-pound guy into bending to my way. Okay, it wasn't my leadership style to begin with, but I certainly can't pull it off when he can bench press me, okay, and toss me in a dumpster if he wanted to. So the way I deal with my stature and everything is to be authentic leader using the traits that I have that complement my leadership style, which is to, and my own mantra for leadership is, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. So the first thing I had to allow my troops to understand is that I care about you. I deeply care about you. I care about your day-to-day lives. I care about your family. I care about your careers. I care about your life. Okay, so you got to know that first before you're going to take any commands or advice from me. You have to know that I'm an authentic leader and that I have your best interest at heart, not my interest, not what my agenda is, but how I can best help you succeed. And then once they understand that you care about them and that you have invested in them, then your leadership skills then are to be your walk, okay? To demonstrate what you're saying, to be the example that they can look to. And then, of course, always ask forgiveness when you're wrong. And another thing is that, never criticize in public, only praise in public, criticize only in private. Just little things like this. So my troops I love them, and I'm being honest with you, I think they love me back. And because they knew that I cared about them and that I was doing everything in my power with my position to take care of them.
That's beautiful. It sounds like you could write a book on leadership next. Thank you, Gretchen. We still have some more questions coming in. So Tammy, do you want to take the next one?
Yes, thank you, Nan. So it looks like we have just some comments that people have wrote in, and so I'll kind of mention a comment and a couple comments, but I do have a question based off of one of our comments. So Craig Dunn mentioned that it was an honor to have met you at ABD and call you my friend. So we wanted to just lift that up so that you knew that, Gretchen. And also, from Rhonda Lydell. She said, Gretchen, I am honored to know you and hope that one day I can add you to my rope team. Your life story is awesome. I can't wait to see you again, shake your hand, and then give you a big hug. So powerful and inspiring. And that was from Rhonda. And I do have a question based off of this rope team concept. Can you talk to us a little bit about like how you created your rope team or who you thought to add for those who may be facing various adversities and they want to try to start a rope team? What would be some advice you would give them to start a rope team for themselves?
Yeah, so your rope team is important and you might start out with a rope team and then find out later that maybe your anchor person isn't the right person. So don't be afraid to work through your rope team. So here's what I look for, and here's what my rope team looks like, and how I establish my rope team. So, there's things in my life that I really care about. I care about helping other people. I care about the veteran-centric world out there. I care about people with mixed abilities. I care about diversity. I care about making the world a little bit better, whatever it is. Okay, and that's kind of the trajectory that I'm on. And I also like to do wild and crazy things. So there's that as well. So, and I'm looking for people who say your name in a place where things happen. You know what I'm saying? Where opportunities say that they would say, oh, who'd be really good at that? Gretchen. Or maybe we can, whatever, you know what I'm saying? People who think highly of you, who talk about you in a room where opportunity presents itself. And also understand what your mission in life and what your legacy, what kind of legacy you want to live and leave. And so these are people who have some commonality with you, but not necessarily, because they could be really I've got a couple of people who are really totally different than me that are on my rope team, but they're solid. Okay. And then you have a good rope team the first time you stumble. Okay. The ones that pick in are the keepers. The ones that don't pick in, maybe not so. So it gets a little bit of trial and error, and it's a little scary at first. Okay. Because you don't know until the first time you test that rope team whether or not it's going to hold. And so if it doesn't, then there's some adjustments that need to be made. Look for people who believe in what you're doing, who are enthusiastic, who are optimistic, who say yes more than they say no, who believe in you and themselves, and that bring you joy. And, they should be positive people. Now, you got to have somebody in your rope team who's the realist that tells me, Gretchen, I don't think you should rappel down that waterfall right now. Okay. with your dog and bike. Okay, I have those people, okay, because my sense of danger has been diluted, as they tell me. Okay, so you gotta have the truth speakers. Okay, so that's the process of picking your rope team. And you probably already know maybe one or two people on your rope team that you know that you can count on, but you need to make it official. You need to actually say, let's form a rope team and I want you to be on it. And it needs to be by invitation. I wouldn't assume that someone's on your rope team. I would ask them to be on your rope team. And then you in turn can be on their rope team. And so that's the way that that works. I'm going to tell you, it's one of the most powerful things you can do in your life as you go through your life. And it's going to change for people who are in their 20s. That rope team may change 2 or 3 times as they move through through life. Because even your own desires and goals and purposes change as you go through life. And don't be afraid to change that rope team. And don't be afraid to ask somebody to be on your rope team. You might have to explain to them what it really means. Okay. But I think it's an honor to be asked to be on somebody's rope team. And also I feel like it's an honor to be on somebody's rope team because I want to be there for people who are climbing the mountain, who are taking risk in life, good risk, good calculated risk for the better good, for the common good, not for themselves, but for the common good. I want to support those people because there's nothing more beautiful than to see people reach their potential. It's, it's priceless.
Very true. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I'll turn it back over to Nan to ask some more questions. I see we have a couple more as well as some comments. So turn it back over to you, Nan.
Thanks, Tammy. I'm just going to go in chronological order. In addition to the comments that we're seeing in the Q&A, I just wanted to share, there was an inordinate number of chats coming through as you were telling your story. People genuinely thanking you and saying things like, I actually needed to hear this today. This provided me with a reset. And so I want you to know that in addition to the specific questions that we're reading out, you've had a multitude of people chiming in and thanking you for sharing with us today. The next comment is from Patty, our colleague, dear Patty. She says, if someone would kindly, and we are here sharing it with you. In addition to finding new capabilities, she says, you have also found new ways to serve. While many of us are not soldiers, I assure you, you are serving people with new, impactful, and much needed ways. And so thank you. So I think her message is just that you continue to serve, even though you're not actively in the military anymore.
Right.
And here we are as evidence of that. We're all
I just switched uniforms.
Nice.
I just would, and that's my mountaintop, is to every day try to engage with something that matters. Okay, like, that's that dash between the day you were born and the day that you take your last breath. That simple dash accounts for my whole life, and I want that dash to stand for something. I want to have that dash not just be, I want it to be able to people say, Gretchen was a good friend. Gretchen was a kind person. Gretchen was helpful. Gretchen was whatever. Okay. And so, it matters to me the legacy I leave behind when I make the big Rainbow Bridge trip or whatever. And so, and like I said, I want to take as many people to the top as I can. People who want to be on my rope team. I'm out and going for broke. And if you want to join me, come on. I'm happy to have you. So anyway, thank you for the nice, wonderful comments from everybody that joined today. It speaks to my heart. Like I said, I hope you walk away with something that you can take home and maybe incorporate into your own personal life.
I think you have done that for all of us, actually. Before we go on, we do have a couple more comments and one big question to ask you, but do we have a hard stop at 3:15?
No, we can go a little over.
Okay. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Tammy. Thank you.
Okay, so just to make a comment here that we have from Anita Burns, who's one of our colleagues here and works in our accessibility office. She says she wanted to tell you, Gretchen, that you have given her additional tools to help our students with disabilities. Helping them is one of her greatest gifts in her job. So she thanks you for what you have given her today. And then I'll just go on to the question that I see from Craig Dunn. And he says, I'm still having PTSD issues from 9/11 as a collapse survivor. I have night from AVD. I really have hard days to land survivor's guilt. What do you do in my place? And secondly, how would you handle this on a day-to-day basis? It really does impact my daily life.
Yeah, so PTSD is a hard thing. And I will say this, there's not one road that works for everybody when you're dealing with PTSD or moral injury or survivor's guilt. Okay, that looks different for everybody, but there's certain tools I think that work for everyone. And one is you can't do this by yourself. So the analogy I use is the scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz. Okay, so remember at the very end, as they're skipping down the yellow brick road and they can see the Emerald City and it's right there. And you remember all the things they went through to get to the Emerald City. And the scarecrow is going to get a brain, the Tin Man's going to get a heart, the lion's going to get courage. They're all going to achieve something they really wanted. And at the last ditch, the Wicked Witch, okay, who still scares the BGs out of me. Okay, she's a scary lady. And those monkeys. So she sends those really mean monkeys and they attack them and they unstuff the scarecrow. And they take his stuffing and they scatter it all over the road and in the bushes. And the scarecrow is immobilized. He cannot restuff himself. He has to have his friends take his stuffing and restuff him. And that's what dealing with PTSD and survivor's guilt and everything else. You cannot restuff yourself. You have to go and find other resources and people to help restuff you so that you can stand up and get back on the yellow brick road and go towards your Emerald City. So it's not something you can do by yourself. There are lots of resources out there, and I can make a list of them. But organizations like No Barriers and getting a service dog from America's Vet Dogs, which provides dogs to veterans for free of cost, finding a rope team, all these things are part of restuffing yourself so that you can stand up on your own. And you just cannot do it by yourself. And it's a hard question to answer in a short forum like this. And so if I'm happy to have an off dialogue with the person who asked this question, but the advice is to incorporate a rope team and find other people to help you and resources that can help you.
Thank you. And I'll turn over to Nan for the next question.
Okay. So we have a couple left and we're thinking we will wind down, but we want to just get the last few in quickly. Molly from Student Services says, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story. And she asks, what has been the most influential factor in your healing journey?
I think in my healing journey that I had to be able to look myself in the mirror and reconcile the things that were required of me as a soldier with the person that I am, Gretchen, the mother, the wife, the daughter, the sister, the friend. And you have to, because your moral thermometer gets damaged sometimes in things like combat, when you have to make decisions that you, under any other circumstances, you would not have to make. Like in a million years, under normal circumstances, I would not take someone else's life. I would not do that. But I had to in combat because that was my job to do. And sometimes circumstances forced me to do that. And it violates your moral thermometer. And so you have to be able to reconcile that at the end of the day. So your healing process is to forgive yourself and to understand that you were performing a duty required of you based on a position that you held. Command Sergeant Major Evans had a responsibility. Gretchen Evans is a loving, caring person. And so was Sergeant Major Evans. So I have to be able to stand every morning when I'm brushing my teeth and look at myself and say, you are a good, decent person, and reconcile those two very hard things to reconcile. That was the most healing thing that I finally grasped, was to say, it's okay. All right, you did what you had to do, what was required of you for your duty and for your country and for your soldiers. you're still a good person. You're still a kind person. You're still Gretchen Evans.
Sounds like you were learning to give yourself some self-forgiveness and all of that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm going to defer to Daniel at this point. We have 2 more questions left.
Well, I want to be sensitive to Gretchen. Gretchen, how are you doing? Are you okay with a
Yeah.
couple more questions? So why don't we do 2 more questions and
Okay.
in this format, and then conclude.
Okay, I'll hand it over to Tammy in that case.
Okay, thank you, Nan. So this is from Paolo, and he says, Gretchen, what moment in your life do you think more important?
What moment in my life was the most
Is-
important?
Yes, I believe that's what he's asked.
I think the day that I realized that it wasn't about me. Okay, like I didn't want to be a self-licking ice cream cone. Okay, I thought it's not about me. It's about how I can take this the beauty of life and do something with it for others. And that was the most important thing I ever learned in my life.
Thanks, I like it. And I'll turn it over to Nan for our last question.
Thanks, Tammy. I actually have a question to add, if it's okay, if it's all right to add one on the end. But the last question in the Q&A says, it's from Catherine Fritz. And she says, I know that I have always assumed you are, but Gretchen, will you be on my rope team? That's from Catherine Fritz.
Absolutely. Send me a text.
Nice.
Yes, yes is the word.
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask a question of my own, Gretchen.
Oh, ask away.
Okay, thank you. So given that it's Women's History Month and we're sort of thinking about things through the lens of women's history, I'm just curious. My very first job or my first professional job, I should say, was teaching high school English in the Bronx. And I was very aware of the fact that I was female, in that I needed to dress a certain way to be taken seriously and even behave a certain way to be taken seriously by kids who weren't that much younger than I was at 22. And I was just curious, in your career in the military, did you ever reach a point where you didn't have to think of yourself through the lens of being a woman, but you were just a command sergeant, or you were just a person? Or did you always have that sense of seeing things through the lens of having to think of your gender as you were performing your duties? And I know that might sound like a funny question. I'm just curious what your experience was of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot all about being a female and being small. And, you know, I didn't give that to myself. My troops gave that to me because it became a non-entity. I was just their sergeant major, and they didn't care that I was a female, and they didn't care that I was small. What they cared about was that I was a sergeant major that cared about them. So they are the ones that removed those barriers and those thoughts of inadequacy from me, not myself. Okay, so they allowed me, it was just sergeant major. And, you know, they never, you know, no, probably they made fun of me behind my back. I don't know. They called me Spitfire. That was their nickname for me, Spitfire. But they are the ones that empowered me to be able just to do my job. I didn't have to worry about size or gender. It came from them.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Nan. Thank you, Tammy. Gretchen, based on the comments that I've seen, the questions and comments that I've heard, you have inspired us. You have challenged us. You have touched us. You have moved us, and you have changed us. And we're so grateful for your life and for your willingness to be here and share your story and help us learn and grow through it. Such a powerful message, and we're beyond ourselves to have you in our board and to know that you're part of our team. We love you wearing that shirt, and thank you for being here. Thank you everyone for participating, for everyone who contributed to helping this happen. Thank you so much, and let's continue the conversation. This was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Everybody have a wonderful day.